I'm AJ Bianco from Podcast PD, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows in the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
It's time for the High Tech Podcast. I am Josh, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by
Will.
There we go. Hey, we nailed it. Look at that. We remembered our name.
It might have been actual lag, or it might have just been a bit. You don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, you never know. It might have been planned. We might have tested that several times before we entered the podcast. No one knows. I know. And the answer is we did not do that. So anyway, welcome to the High Tech Podcast, where we talk about higher education, technology, fun topics, occasionally video games, sometimes our thoughts, sometimes just random
we try and keep those pretty sparse.
Anecdotes about the day,
Yeah.
whatever it may be. The High Tech Podcast doesn't necessarily have a streamlined plan for every day. We have a topic and we see what happens. And sometimes we go off topic,
What are we working with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of notes today. Six lines. That's pretty good. But
we got some notes. But before we get into notes,
some of them have like 3 words.
Before we get into notes, I just want to share on the podcast. Sticky toffee pudding is very good. I would just like to say this in a public forum. Will and I were out last night with a handful of friends, and we both got sticky toffee pudding, and it was fantastic.
Just so good.
That's all I gotta add. Which reminds me, I need to Venmo you back.
I got you. It's on
my phone.
No
okay, cool. I joked I was going to ghost him, but I'm not actually going to do that. Well, maybe I will. Who knows? It's still early in the morning. I mean, evening, whatever time you're listening. So
good job.
Yeah,
he's the one, folks. He's the one that cares. He has it in his mind. Really, he doesn't want to make things time.
It's more now just a thing that I think is fun to be obnoxious about. You know what I mean? And that's really what it's about. Oh, you got Mean Cup.
No, Square One.
Oh, Square One?
Square One, and still hashtag not a sponsor.
Hashtag not a sponsor. Okay. Well, I have, if we're playing that game, a New Holland coffee. So,
ooh, yeah. There you go.
Mine's empty though, so I'm sad. I already finished it.
Now that we've taken a tour of the Lancaster coffee scene,
yeah,
folks,
Lancaster
feel
coffee
free,
scene.
if
Also,
you're in the
other
area.
small addendum. Did you know you could get a quad shot? Anybody listening to the podcast know that this was a thing?
Yes, everyone knows
that's
a thing.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Okay, I just
if you want to kill yourself,
attention.
But sure.
I mean, I didn't do it. It seemed like that would be a lot, but
you thought about it.
I did think about it. Anyway, it's the whole thing. We drink coffee. We live in a city. There you go. That's the background of the High Tech Podcast. Today, though, we are continuing a series, our ungrading series, or how to do ungrading, or whatever the heck we titled this on the episodes. I don't actually remember. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
But we're here to talk about ungrading. So. In our first part, we kind of explained a little bit about it. Second part, Justin joined us to talk about why do ungrading. And to break the fourth wall, Will and I are going to be sparse on talking about that because we haven't actually recorded that part yet. So you guys actually know more than we know right now.
Wow,
crazy,
that's a little
right?
trippy.
That's a little trippy, right? You have heard future us before we have heard future us. Wrap your mind around that a little bit.
This is some Marvel level, like multiverse.
Multiversal right now. And, it's pretty crazy. So who knows? Some of you might be like, that episode never released. That's because future Josh and future Will never made it there. We don't know. Who knows? Nobody knows. Right now, it's all possibilities. Okay. So, but in theory, Justin came on and said something good. We'll see. So this week, we're talking about how do you set this up in your LMS. So we've been kind of more theoretical about ungrading and things like that. But Will and I felt like if we're going to talk about ungrading, we need to talk about how to set it up in your LMS. Because I love you, faculty, but you need to remember that there is an LMS. And whatever you decide to do in the world today, you're gonna have to use that LMS, whether you like it or not.
Your philosophical or your theoretical decisions require something like an LMS to deliver the teaching.
They have to enter that technology world a bit. So we want to talk about how to set it up, because contrary to popular belief with some faculty I've worked with, it is not impossible to set ungrading up in an LMS, and there is actually a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Wrong way, for instance, is to just set it up like you're grading like normal. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but who knows these days? It'd be like, I'm gonna go fly, but I'm gonna build a car. Like that's automatically no.
My goal is to do something that's really good, neat, and new, but I'm going to use the exact old way of doing it to get the new stuff done. No.
Basically just describe higher education.
So next subject. No. I like this conversation for a couple of reasons. Ungrading is already, I just show up because he pays me. No, I'm joking.
That's not
money. True. Hashtag not true. This conversation is really challenging because you're not only thinking about what you're doing with your pedagogical process of ungrading, you're rethinking what it is to work with your students and how to assess them, think through what they're doing, what you're doing. But now we have the whole system side of it too. Between Josh and I, correct me if I'm wrong, and I would actually encourage you to think about ones you've explored, or you may not have, but like we've managed ourselves 5 different learning management systems, or maybe 4, but like you started at your position running one system, you switched to another, Schoology and then Canvas, right? Yep. I've been an administrator in Moodle, Canvas, Schoology, and Docebo, which is more corporate focused. Have you used others? Did you like Pathwrite's one you guys investigated?
Yeah, so I mean, like I've used Pathwrite a little bit. I haven't had to set it up for big
actually
use,
do a course or something.
I mean, I've used Rise, Articulate, which is not necessarily an LMS itself. It's more of like e-authoring tools, but I would consider it in like a hybrid category, because there's grading that has to happen. There's stuff that gets set up in it. It's not like Storyline where you're just creating a learning video and things that's going to connect into something.
You are creading like a sequence of learning.
Creating a sequence of learning. So
with grading and stuff.
It's somewhere.
Well, and so with like across those systems, folks, it's not easy. It's not consistent. You know what I mean? Like I think it's like
about LMSs, if I can say this for a second, is that for some reason they use a rocket ship to define quizzes, and I don't understand why.
All of them.
Why?
Do you want to know? Do you know why?
Yeah. Why?
They've all purchased a third party. That rocket ship stuff, I've actually worked with this company. I know them. That rocket ship stuff is a third party assessment company. And so they purchase that product and put it into the LMS and make it look like it's the LMS.
That's stupid. I hate it. It's dumb.
It's like when Schoology did it, I think Canvas started using them. I remember something else I was working on that was not an LMS, but was and that's how I found out about this. I was doing a contract and this company was looking at this third party. And so I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is all of the stuff that Schoology uses and like the rocket ship and everything. Yeah. It's from a third party.
Okay. I have so many answers now. And
so
many more questions.
In short, my point of this system stuff and this like kind of lead out warning is that it's not easy because they're not consistent, because their systems were all always built to have a grade book in mind, to have a number value in mind. So if we're going to talk through features, we're going to talk through ideas, like Josh and I have a bunch of stuff written down about what we want to get into, but like you have to remember as you start this journey, you're trying to do something with the system that it's not built to do. It's not set up that way. So you are working with loopholes. You are working with duct tape, digital duct tape. You are trying to finagle these things into accomplishing a better, a different assessment system, right? And so like the first warning in there is you might actually have to still use some of the grading features. Like don't just go to your LMS and be like, oh, let me just turn off all grading features, right? You might have to use some of them depending on your LMS, because sometimes those grading features hide other features you want to, like if you turn a discussion into Schoology, into ungraded, you can't use rubrics, right? Yeah. Like that was one thing that I used. I don't know if that's changed. It's been a couple years since but like if I made a discussion ungraded, I couldn't put a rubric on it. Well, rubrics typically do align to like numbers and grades, but they don't have to. A rubric could just be to help folks understand what you want for them, right? So that's a tool you might still want to use, a rubric, but you have to turn on grading for a discussion in Schoology to use it. One example, we'll get into some more.
Yeah.
But like that's where this, I think, really starts for me, is like, you're gonna have to be flexible as you dig into these systems.
Yeah, and that's like, just to put it in a broad perspective too, because this is where I remember distinctly two conversations with faculty members that I really appreciate where they're coming from. But we, like, at our institution, we have to do these settings check things I've talked about them here before, where we have to like make sure the LMS is set up correctly, so the grade book is going to show the correct grade to students. And if anybody is listening to this who's a faculty member at our institution, I just want to remind you, we don't like doing it either. So side notice, this is not
no one
ODL's
wants it.
preference. So sorry, that was the acronym for our office. I just realized I jumped into work speak. But
Yeah, it's totally
so
fine.
but I've had conversations because we'll come across these ungrading courses. And I argue there are specific ways to set up ungraded courses in LMS, but to Will's point, folks, we need to remind ourselves that grading is the primary way of assessment in education right now. Whether you
And
like it or
has
not,
been
that
for
is
a
the reality.
long
So
time.
don't get mad at your learning management system company or the people at your institution who don't even have control over how all that's configured. That it's not a friend to ungrading, because they don't care. You're not their primary audience. So they're going to set up their LMS with grading in mind. So Will's right. You're going to have to do a little bit of jerry rigging. And I remember, though, having a conversation with an instructor, like, well, I shouldn't have to set all this stuff up. This just seems like a lot of work for an artificial grade, since I'm doing ungrading. And I tried to communicate to them, I know you think it's an artificial grade. It's not, though. In the LMS, it's a real grade. And also it connects to, in most institutions these days, other systems and data warehouses that your student success teams are using to keep track of how students are doing in their courses. This data is being used to just see how success is going across a program. And whether we've talked about this on our podcast before about data and things like that in season 2, you can check that out. We have our own opinions about some of that LMS surveillance components. But I also think there are bonuses to that too. I do think, like, for instance, at our institution, there are basically the equivalent of advisors. They're constantly checking a system called Dropout Detective in our LMS to see, like, where students at. Are they submitting things? Are they getting graded? Are they risk of hitting a point where they might fail out of the course or hit some issues? And they try to get ahead of that stuff. So for the student's benefit, it's not just to track the student, it's to help the student succeed in their course. And we have the ability, in a way that we didn't 10 years ago, to do that. So all of this is to say, by you just choosing to not do anything in the LMS, you are also making it more difficult for other people who are trying to work with you to help make sure your student's succeeding.
And that just caution to us, to faculty member and instructional designers, technologists, like, make sure you know the impact. Take some time to find, like, Josh, your institution currently has those things. I worked at your institution when it did not have those things. And so you could have gotten away with it. Like, not gotten away with it, but like 10 years ago, whatever, if someone wanted to ungrade and literally just said, I'm not going to use the LMS, it really had no downstream effect, because the faculty member still, at any one point, this is a very practical thing to ungrading, right? All of us are still going to have to submit an A, B, or C in the student information system. I mean, it's just still a practical requirement. Laws require it of institutions that want accreditation, have accrediting bodies that require, like, so yes, if you even go to the best level of ungrading, that's fine. No grades, 0 numbers with you and your students, totally fine. You, faculty members, still have to submit an ABC at the end of the day. That's a fact. Well, if you're using your LMS back in the day without these systems Josh is talking to, all you'd have to do is turn off all the grading, right? And like I've said, a little caveat, maybe that got in the way of some of the features, but just turn off grading. Maybe they had them submit things and you can use the system to go back and forth that way. It's more communication management then. But that's not necessarily the case. I know of not only Josh's institution, but others that have really in-depth systems now that are not only flag systems to watch for bad situations or a situation where students might be failing or having a hard time, right? But like just communication across the companies, not companies, but like from registrar to student services to faculty instruction to even centers of teaching and learning. And many of them are now very connected to like what's actually happening in the classroom. If you aren't using the system, you are getting in the way of all of those other teams who are trying to support your learners.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where we have to, I think, hold both of these things in each hand. I want to do ungrading because I think it's, I'm saying hypothetically, better for my students' learning. And I want to make sure I don't get in the way of all the systems that exist to help my students get through college. And one of those very practical ones is in disability services and accessibility. If you're not doing stuff in your LMS, if you're not using your course effectively, and maybe even using the grading features, even if you're not grading, right, still using the features, teams who are in the accessibility teams and disability teams will not be able to keep up with your students as well. It's going to make it harder to support them. So
Yeah.
like, I think we've got a pretty good established statement here of like, this is good to do. I don't know if you got any further, but like we can definitely dig into some of the specifics.
I think that's good
Like,
enough
there
for
are ways
now.
we can do this.
Realizing we should set up a separate episode for why to even do this part, but I think that gives enough of an argument. I don't need to slam people over the head with it. So the question then is, how do you do this? Okay, so
Yep.
a couple different ways. Caveat will be, Will and I are not omniscient to all LMSs. While we've touched most of them.
I thought you got there finally. I thought it was like you
Yeah,
ascended.
no, I mean, like,
all
LMSs. I'm underplaying it, obviously.
Oh,
No, I'm
okay.
joking.
Humility.
So
right.
like, caveat here, as Will mentioned, the two LMSs I'm most familiar with are Canvas and Schoology. I've, like he said, messed around with an LMS called oh my gosh, I'm the one
Pathright.
Pathright. There we go. Pathright. Will and I have both played with Google Classrooms, but it's not nearly as popular in higher ed. So Will and I's experience is less probably involved with Google Classrooms than a technologist who might be working in K-12. So I don't think either of us have really played with Blackboard much from the setup side, but we know of Blackboard. So, but anyway, this is all the caveat that a lot of the stuff we're talking about comes from that experience. But I will say that most of everything we'll talk about can probably be done in any LMS, because most of the LMSs, let's be honest, they're not really revolutionizing the world of LMSs right now. They're all kind of just doing the same thing in their own way.
And at the end of the day, they all have some grade book, which is rows and columns, and then how they do the math, right? So they all center around that.
So anyway, so the first thing, and we realized it rhymed, but if you're going to need to remember this, it rhymes. Remember pass, fail, scale. Okay. So at the end of the day, I get it. Your ungraded course doesn't get a grade. Okay. But it does. It gets a pass, fail grade. Okay. Like either they don't pass the course or they pass the course. So in most LMSs, you can set up a grading scale, or Canvas calls it a grading scheme because they can't just call it the same thing everybody else does.
Rubric guy wrote that one.
Yeah, freaking rubric guy. But you can usually customize those scales. So some LMSs will come with them pre-built. We had to build one in Canvas. So all we did was create, like, in Canvas, we created a P and an F for the letters. And then we gave 100 was the P and 0 was the F. Okay.
Yeah.
So that creates yourself a pass fail scale. Okay. So
in many systems, you might have to do that. Like if yours does not have a built-in pass fail, you just have to make it 0, 100.
A lot of them don't build it in because they don't spend a ton of time pre-building scales, because they know they give you a system to allow you to build the scale you need.
Right.
So, like, for instance, in Canvas, they only had like a default scale, which was ironically super annoying because it was 1% off of our standard scale for the whole institution. So it didn't get confusing at all. And
if you just used it, if it would have just shift 1%.
I'm not bitter about it at all. But they didn't have a pass fail one, so we created one. We called it a pass fail. Most of your, if you want to do this for your institution, most of your LMS administrators have some way of creating scales for the whole institution in the LMS.
Yep.
If it's just for your course, you can create it for your course. That's fine. Most of the LMSs will allow you to do that. If you're not sure how to do that, connect with LMS admin or like a digital learning team like Will and I have worked with before. We can help you guys do that type of stuff. So, but anyway, so create this pass fail scale, because basically what you're doing in Canvas is you're giving it the parameters for passing and failing in the course. And because it's kind of an all or nothing situation, you want that scale to basically be 0 fail, 100 pass. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece. The second piece then comes to how you set up your assignments. And remember, there are limitations to what you do. So most LMSs, their default is one of two options, which is what we call like assignment group weighting, which is where you put your assignments into these groups with certain weights on them. Or they'll allow you to do no weighted groups where all the assignments are just in the course and the total points equals whatever, right?
Yeah.
The 100 there. So the way I like setting this up in Canvas, and Will and I were talking, school, you should have been able to do this as well.
Yeah.
Which is ditch the assignment group weighted stuff. Just turn off that option if you can turn it off. If you can't, the easy trick is just put all your assignments under one group, weighted 100%.
Right. Yeah. You can
side note,
fake it. In Schoology,
feel-
it was a checkbox. Like literally above the
Yeah.
grading categories, just uncheck the box. Boom, you're good to go.
Same thing in Canvas. I believe Blackboard's probably the same way. Like the major players at LMSs usually do this the same way. So turn it off and then basically just set up all your assignments as what I call complete incomplete assignments. So basically any assignment you set up that they're submitting to, set it up so that it's rated that if you check it off as complete, they get 100%. If you check it off as incomplete, they get 0%. Now this is where, well, I don't know from your experience, but this is where, from my experience, faculty get tripped up. They're like, yeah, but I'm not giving a grade. I know you're not giving a grade, but you kind of are by saying you completed this stage satisfactory in the course.
And this is one of those moments where if someone has not completed, if they are not able to move forward, mark them that way because someone downstream needs to know. You know, if you mark them fail or incomplete, that gets reported through your systems potentially, and student services finds out and can help the student. You know, like this is, it's still important to do this. To your point about like technically, Josh, any of them can do this and all of them are arbitrary. Like if you've got people, if you're processing like, oh, this pass fail stuff, I mean, just why are you saying do this, guys? It's just like an extra step. I don't need to do it. They're not getting a grade. Grades are arbitrary. Tell your students it's just helpful language to know that they're doing well. Like it doesn't have to be you got 100 or you got a 0. Just tell them, ignore that. We are working in an ecosystem that assumes if you pass, you're doing well. If you fail, you have to try again. That, you know, that's up to you and how you set your syllabus, right? But like if somebody fails, it's okay. It should be okay. Let them try again. That's the point of ungrading, and that they can continue to draft and improve. And if maybe, I believe ungrading even goes as far as saying like if they keep failing it or they can't get past the assignment, go back to the learning objective, go back to the learning outcome, give them a new activity that might be more in line with their skills.
Yeah,
that's okay. Let them learn the content.
Use them from the other one and give them a different one. Like you can adapt these things. So like perfect example, right? So you have a student, they're trying to submit this assignment. They haven't met the standards, but it's fine in ungrading because they're going to resubmit as a new thing. But you want to make some adjustments to the assignment, kind of customize it for them based on the things you need to do. This is easy. You excuse them from the original assignment. In any LMS, there's some way to type in excused, which will then just pull it out of the options entirely. And then you create a new one, individually assign it to that student.
Yep.
Incomplete, complete, you do that, and it's that type of thing. And I know this feels like it's unnecessary, but it's not, because what you're also doing for the student is giving them a tangible system to look at, to understand where they are in the course, like to give them better tools. One of our criticisms of ungrading, I really like ungrading, but one of my criticisms and a lot of people's criticisms of ungrading is it does put a lot of onus on the student to track how they're doing. They're learning and how they're keeping up with it. So this type of system can help them better understand that. It can help them see where they're at. It also helps outside people see where they're at. And sometimes you may not need to do that type of thing, and maybe they just didn't meet the outcomes. They resubmit the assignment. You just don't give them a pass incomplete or complete incomplete thing yet. You just leave it ungraded until they submit again, and you grade from there.
Well, and this is one of those questions that I'm actually writing down right now for Justin last episode. But anyways, I'm not going to mess with your multiversal minds.
Multiversal,
sorry,
this may have already been answered. We'll see.
But like, it stands, and I have my thoughts and opinions, but like I'd love to hear his thoughts, and even our next episode, we'll make sure to ask Tim Shea, maybe Dr. Tim Shea. But at the end of the day, if you've got the GPA requirement A, B, C, D, like you have to submit something. You know, if you're an ungrading faculty member, do you just choose and do you communicate to your students you can get an A in this class or you can get an F? Is that the option? Like, I wouldn't want to. I would actually think that'd be more pressure. But if you allow students to get A's, B's, C's, D's, right? If you create a system in your like, you are coming that much closer back to grading. So like, if a student continues to fail an assignment in your class, does that make them eligible for a B? Like, I would be really curious about. We know the math, we know the systems about how this works, Josh. Like, at the end of the day, if the students in your course and you just give them passes on everything, they're getting an A. That's like, you know what I mean? But if a student actually does fail some assignments and never gets a pass on them, you now as a faculty member should be wrestling with what equals a B, or is it just A or F? That's a really hard, I think, ungrading decision to process, because in my opinion, if your class is pass or fail, A or F, that's high pressure. I have to do enough to get an A. Otherwise,
Yeah,
the other option is to fail.
Yeah, I think the thing that, like, to my experience that I've had with ungrading, Will, that it depends on how you're doing it, right? So, like, a lot of our experience has to do with these contract type of ungrading courses that are
Sure.
the different type. In the traditional ungrading, most of the pressure being taken off it is more about, like, if you submit this assignment, you don't hit the checked off, you've met the requirements yet. You're going to have continual opportunities to just keep doing and resubmitting until you
Yeah.
do, with extensive feedback. The criticism of ungrading is, well, what about the unmotivated students who don't want to keep doing that stuff?
Right.
Now, the critics back would say, yeah, but those unmotivated students, the traditional grading system, they're not learning anyway. They're just basically completing the things they need to get a better grade. And then, so, like, this is where I will say, as much as I love ungrading, I also still think it's a little hopeful. Like, there's a component of where, like, it's not, like,
Yeah.
it's expecting a lot from students, but I also think it's dependent. I know I've seen people do ungrading where you're right, well, they do give other categories of options,
Right.
but then to
Right.
me, that's not hard ungrading. That's more of like a weird hybrid version of ungrading,
Right.
where it's like
Right.
you're more of, yeah. So I think it depends. I think either way you want to do it, you have to set up whatever is considered passing in the course. Those assignments being checked off in the LMS count as passing. So, like, give you a good example, right? Let's say you have a course. Let's say you have 6 major assignments that they can keep resubmitting over the course, however you have it planned out. There might be draft moments where you're scaffolding. Just because we're doing ungrading doesn't mean we're not scaffolding anymore. So let's say you have a couple of these assignments, they're scaffolded out, they're submitting, they can resubmit if they don't quite meet what you want. You give a lot of feedback, all that type of stuff. But at the end of the course, you need them to finish these 5 things to satisfactory level to be considered passing, right? However you get there is up to you. But at the end of the day, you need those 5 assignments in the LMS to equal that 100 that passing equals in the scale.
Right.
Okay. Then you can disperse a whole bunch of other required assignments that don't count towards any kind of grading system thing, that could be checkpoints for those other assignments. That you're doing through, and those don't count towards the final thing, the final grade in the LMS. As far as the LMS is considered, they're not graded, but to you, they're checkpoints that they have to keep getting past to get to the final thing. Again, we're talking vague because it depends on how you set up your ungraded thing, but it's possible to do that. That's how I would do that system in an LMS.
And well, to put it in, to anchor it in one example, if you're talking a paper, the paper might have the grade, but like the first draft, the second draft, the outline, revising appears would all be required checkpoints, but they would not have a grade. But mathematically is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Another way is to say you're doing that paper, you've got 3 checkpoints. You could still make all of those count towards the final grade, but they have to pass them satisfactory. So maybe I get to checkpoint 1 that's in week 2 or whatever. Student submits the work. I give them a ton of feedback, but they haven't quite got it yet. So I don't give them anything. I don't give a check. I don't give an X. I just say
It's
I
open.
reassign it to them. I say I need you to submit it by this date to me again with this, and they keep doing it until they get that check. And they keep doing the next thing until they get the check, and they keep doing the next thing until they've gotten the check that it's satisfactory to that component, and then all of that then equals the 100 and pass. Now I know with interacting with a lot of faculty about this, there's already some faculty who are big fans of ungrading who are listening to this. They're like, this sounds unnecessary. But again, what Will and I are saying is your LMS doesn't have a system for your ungrading, so you've got to figure out kind of a jury rig system to make it work. And the reason I think it's so important to do that is, one, because the LMS connects into a bunch of other systems that other people who are trying to help your students succeed are using. Two, I think you still need, in this day and age, some type of system that proves to the student where they're at in the course so they can understand, so it's not nebulous to them where they're at.
Yep.
And you can also, give proof of where the student's been at the end of the day. You still need to also prove where the student's at, what the feedback you've been giving, that you've been tracking, that you've been active with the student. And I think this type of system gives you a way of doing it. And again, you can change the scale or whatever you want. If you don't want the fail to be actual fail, like, you could put it to like unsatisfactory, right? Like, or something like that, like a U or whatever it is. Because then in most LMSs, you can also set it up that incomplete, complete grades show that letter for the grade. So like, you could do that so that you could use that X in the LMS. We keep using an X because most LMSs have like an incomplete complete option where you can like put a check mark or an X that translates into a point value.
And when I would work with folks in Schoology, for instance, there was a bigger push in the K-12 districts. So again, context, I was a contract trainer for Schoology. I would go from the product to K-12 districts, to their clients, and teach them how to use the product and try to contextualize it, right? So I was in a K-12 school district, and they would tell me, well, we do, for kindergarten to third grade, competency-based instruction. We don't give grades. So then it's the work of like, okay, well, what's your competency scale? And it's something like you were just saying, unsatisfactory, satisfactory, exceeding, excelled, or something. You know what I mean? It'd be some like 4 or 5 point scale like that, and you'd have to change out all the numbers for letters, words, and you'd have to like make it. Schoology accomplished that pretty well. There always had to be a number, and so like that's what grade books are based for math. We would do something like 1, 2, 3, 4 was the grades, and a grade book at the end of the day ended up being like 72 points or something, right? It'd be kind of crazy because it's all these fours adding up, but that works. You know what I mean? Like you just have to know that the number for the competency based instruction didn't matter. We were just trying to give them, did you achieve the competency of this skill? Yes or no? And there happened to be a number associated with it. One of the points that I would make with that, I know this is kind of sneaking up to a final point that we have to make on this, but like some grade books, this is a kind of a caution, but take this carefully, whatever. Some grade books let you hide the grade book. Some grade books let you hide the numbers altogether. So like you have to be really careful about what you do with that, because if you hide the grade book to the student, it's one of the things in a function, like we're just talking features. If I hide the grade book, sometimes they can't see your feedback. If you hide the grades, sometimes they can see your feedback, but not, how they're overall doing in the pass fail scheme. Like whatever it is, you have to be very careful about what you're doing with your grade book, because I had some folks say to me in those Schoology days, well, we want to use the, unsatisfactory, satisfactory, excelling language, but we don't want to show them the grade book. They would hide the grade book, and then the students couldn't see if they were doing the rest of it. You know what I mean? Like it was doing something, hey, we're being good. We're not showing them the grades. We're not showing them the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. But then it hid what they were trying to do, communicate with the students. We got to be careful with these features and understand, frankly, every single checkbox that you use, so that you know what the student's experience is going to be. Because for ungrading, that's the point. The student's experience and recontextualizing or recreating even the graded experience, the process of getting feedback and improving your learning. You're trying to redo that. You're undoing a bunch of the old systems and redoing it in a new system. So if you do something unintentionally, like, okay, I'm just going to hide the grade book, and then you get rid of the good stuff, like seeing your feedback, you have not gotten anywhere. You have to be ready to, and this is kind of how we opened the episode, but you have to be ready to hold both of those in at the same time. Students, you're going to see a number. It is okay. That's not your grade. Also, you will have feedback from me. You will know throughout the entire course if you're doing well. Listen to and read my feedback. Don't look at the number, because the number is going to be irrelevant grading wise. I just, and it's worth telling the students, depending on your learning management system, If I hide the number, you can't see my feedback. Tell them that if that's the case. Some of them it's okay. Some of them you can do
Yeah.
both. You can just hide the numbers and see the feedback. But you got to be ready to know that stuff and work with your LMS or your LMS team to figure those settings out.
Yeah, and I was going to give the caveat, and I'm curious, Will, if you have an LMS in mind that does do this, but most LMSs, in my experience, if you hide the gradebook, it does hide the feedback, but you can hide the points, and you're usually fine without. So, like for instance, in Canvas, I know you can hide like the percentage and points and only show a letter grade as how grades display. You can set that up
Sure.
for every assignment, like how it displays the grade. I
Right.
usually
Yeah.
recommend go with that model in ungrading because the point value, I do agree, can be confusing to students. They're like, "Oh, I got a 0." It's like, no, it's in the unsatisfactory category. You can resubmit,
Right.
And a lot of
Right.
times, if you're clear about that, that's not as big of a problem. Um, so anyway, before I continue with my thought, is there an LMS that you know of that if you hide the points, it removes feedback? Because I think Schoology was the same way. You could say display as letter grade, and it didn't actually hide the feedback on the assignment.
Well, and I'm thinking through of it at two angles. So just clarify, like hiding the grade book altogether, like the
Yeah.
whole thing, that can get. I think it was
In
Schoology
most
where you could
cases, I
hide
think
it or
that
turn it
hides the
off,
feedback. Yeah.
but you
You
couldn't
can
get
turn off the
right.
grade
But
back.
like when what I think what you're talking about is like at an assignment level, show the grade number or not,
Yeah.
and like in Schoology, you could show the entire grade book as letters or the entire grade book as numbers. That was an easy
Okay.
distinction.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think if you set up a scale where those letters, like you're saying, like U is unsatisfactory,
Mhm.
S is satisfactory, you could do that. I think you're right there that you could turn off the numbers and still show the letters and that kind of thing. So, but that's where you need to be careful and know your
Yeah.
LMS, right? Because I don't. You tell me. I think can Canvas do this? I would only want to show those letters too if it was talking ideal world, perfect world. If it's the unsatisfactory, satisfactory language, I don't want them to see an A, B, C, D or an
Oh yeah,
F, right?
no.
Like I don't want them
If
to
you
see
do the
that. I want them to see
ABCD
the
F thing, at the end of the day, I don't see a lot of ungrading situations where you're actually doing ABCDF. I think you're either
right.
doing pass fail or you're doing probably honestly as we're talking through this, what's better is more of like if you can use some kind of like satisfactory, unsatisfactory language because
Yep.
that's really at the end of the day a lot of what ungrading in its essence is getting at. Like this doesn't meet what I consider
The standard.
satisfactory. Yeah, so like that's kind of what I think I would look at when doing it. The only other thing I was going to add to that is Will and I have kind of just assumed you guys understand this, but I'm going to say this. You do need to use points. Okay, this is the thing that gets confusing to a lot of faculty. They're like, I'm doing ungrading, but why are you telling me to use points? The brain of your LMS is only set up to use points. And whether you
Yep.
like it or not, that is the reality. There's not
Yep.
math can only be done with numbers. It can't be done with wishes.
Yep. Yep.
That's really what it comes down to. So that's why I do think like you just need to think through how things are, what your total points are in the course to equal satisfactory for the whole course, and then what has to be done to get to that point. I realize you're saying I'm not giving points though. I get that. I'm not saying you actually have to grade points. What I'm saying is that's essentially the back end system that's going to run your satisfactory, unsatisfactory stuff. And you just have to make sure that the math on the back end that really doesn't matter for the student, but matters for the functionality of your LMS. It's not
Yep.
artificial because of that. It matters because I'm not just making up a system. It matters because it matters to your LMS. So
Yes.
like you have to do that on the back end to make sure that it works. So that's where points do matter. Like you have to, it's kind of like trying to figure out what does this equal in the code of the LMS of my grade book so that
what's
my
in the
grade book
matrix
so that I can kind of just do what I want in the LMS and it will end up auto producing at the end what I need to show the students they've done what they need to.
And to just do the last scratch on this broken record, that the fact that that's working and that's doing that is what feeds all those other systems for all your other teams.
Yeah.
If you don't use the LMS, if you don't use that math, the other teams won't know how the student's doing. You can't report it. There's no data for that information. So
yeah,
some folks, I don't know. I don't know many ungraders. This is a novel area in my study. It's something I'm excited we're doing this series because I'm learning a lot about it, thinking a lot about it. But like this, there are some folks that might want to say away with the LMS, banish it. Then I'm like, okay, that's fine. I appreciate your sentiment, but the school has probably built systems to try and use those things to help your students. That's a good thing. Helping your students is a good thing.
Yeah.
So we got to work with those systems. We got to do our best to find the middle ground and make the most of it.
Yeah.
I think the last feature element of this, though, that you put on here, and I agree with this. I've used this in my LMSs as well, is an override. At the end of the day, if you have numbers in this system, that's fine. And all the numbers in, like Josh is saying, there's a brain behind your grade book, behind your LMS that's going to run all that for you. It will make a calculation. It is a calculator. That's all it's going to do. And it's automatic. Most grade books have a column you can turn on to override that final grade. And I agree. I've used it tons of time for a bunch of different purposes. Turn that on. Make sure you are the one that can show that final grade to the students. You get to set if they passed, if they failed. Because if you leave it up to the computer might fail them based on how they did in the course. Like that's a possibility.
Will and I are saying all this stuff to say this is how you set up a system that works. Expect that system to not work sometimes. Okay. The reality of it is there's going to be a category or something. Computers, this is why we're not super worried about AI, as we talked about in a video I posted this week now, but will probably be later for you. Is that computers can't deal with all the nuances of actual life. So like there will probably be a situation where this student met this, and this thing, and you feel by the end of the course they've satisfactorily, if that's a word, that felt weird.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. Okay. Has met your requirements to pass the course, and for you to put an A into the system overall. But the LMS, for some reason, this thing is not. So I always say put in an override column so that at the end you can also be like, guess what? Too bad, LMS. This is what I'm saying.
I'm the human here. I'm the captain now.
This is what the actual thing is. And so if you're not familiar with that idea of an override column, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's a column that allows you to enter something that will then basically bypass everything else that's been done in the LMS and the gradebook up to this point. So a lot of places have it. Like Schoology had one automatically. I think it was already on. I don't think you even had to turn it on. I think it was always there. I might be wrong about that.
I don't remember. Yeah, it's been a while.
Canvas, the LMS I'm working on.
I know
right
it
now,
has it.
Yeah, has an option to turn it on. I will say in Canvas it's not on automatically, so that is something you'll have to turn on or ask your LMS administrator or support how to actually turn that on in your course. So that can be turned on. I know Blackboard has one. Most of the LMSs have one. Some of your smaller, more custom ones might not. But the big players in the game, all of them have override columns, and I highly recommend having them on ahead of time in case you need to use it at some point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fairly well snagged this conversation, my friend.
Oh yeah, we snagged it so hard. We I don't know. I was trying to run the transition a bit. We got an app to talk about called Snagit. Snagit. That's all it's called. We got the name right this time. It's not like when we talked about snipped or snibbed or whatever else we called it.
I think we called it sniped.
We called it sniped for a while, but it was snipped.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Something like that. Yep.
Yeah. We'll tag them in the post about this episode and see if they can snip it again and tell us if we're right or wrong. Anyway. But so Snagit is a tool that Will and I are very familiar with. It's run by a company called TechSmith. They are one of the big players in screen recording software, I think is basically how I would define it, right?
They're actually just like big industry for audio media.
I guess it's true. Yeah,
like
audio media,
corporate and higher education. So they do like screen recording. They have Camtasia, which is a video editing platform. They used to run a system that we used at your institution to do like live streaming. Hopefully we stopped using that, but
we for sure have not been using that anymore. We have a thing called Zoom. I don't know what else they have. The thing that Will and I are most familiar with are Snagit and Camtasia. I'll put that in. I'll have to look up. I know they have a handful of other tools in their platform. But Snagit is one that you can get individually. Will and I originally, I think, have used this mainly because we work in fields where we have to end up sending videos to people all the time about how to do something or
videos, screenshots.
Yeah, so Snagit is one of the big players in it, and so we've gotten it and use it. I use Snagit all the time. Will uses it in his work situation. But the reason I want to add Snagit here is because while we've used it most primarily in our work situations with faculty and other trainers and things like that, I've used it in my courses now as a tool as an instructor to provide feedback. And I found Snagit to be incredibly useful for this. So basic rundown of Snagit. It's like any other tools we've talked about before, like Loom and things like that, where you can screen record your screen and your face at the same time, just your face, just your screen, however you want to do it. And then you can edit that video to add like arrows and boxes and, you know, animations and stuff on top of it. Now, Snagit's their lighter version. Camtasia is their more intense video editing version that Will and I are familiar with. Snagit's more, I think the reason they called it Snagit is because they were anticipating Snagit's kind of their lighter version of screen recording that you can do on the fly. Like you can easily do it while you just need to send somebody something real quick. Or you need to get a screenshot of something or an image of your screen and add an arrow to it or something real quick and then share it with someone. That's kind of Snagit's use. Does that feel that's kind of been your experience with how they're kind of pushing it as a tool?
Quick and dirty, right? Just record something, record something, annotate it, send it quickly. You know, like Josh is saying, we make the podcast, the video podcast, we make that in Camtasia. So Camtasia is a full editing suite. It transitions, multiple tracks, blah, 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 blah,
do a lot of
right?
post editing. Snagit doesn't have nearly as much of that for video. There's not really a lot of post editing for Snagit for video. I mean, there's some you can trim and cut your videos and things like that, but there's not
very basic.
Like in Camtasia, which we can do a separate thing on. Will and I can like add zooms and add animations and like all that stuff that you want to do in a video that you're not doing in Snagit. Snagit's a lot simpler, but that's why I liked it, because where I would often use Snagit is when I was grading my online course last semester. There were plenty of times where, gosh, this is going to take me forever to put annotations on all these parts of the paper.
Oh my gosh,
So like it would just be way easier for me to just explain live while having the paper in front of me, talk the student through my feedback. Because it's also going to be easier to show them what I'm talking about. So a lot of times in my instance where I was using it is I was having students do what we call like mechanical, like grammatical layouts for sentences, like sentence structuring. And I have to give feedback, but sometimes it's hard to tell the student, okay, like this should come left because of this word, right? And like why? And because of this context.
And you're saying like the physical placement in the like you're trying to tell them like move it to the left, move it to the right.
Should come here in the diagram because of how it interacts with this clause. Trying to provide that in an annotated comment in Canvas is a nightmare. Okay, like you're trying to describe context clearly, so I'm going over my sentences constantly to try to make sure it makes sense what I'm saying, and I've got arrows going places. Like, so eventually I just got annoyed with doing that, and I started doing more video feedback. And so what I would do with Snagit is I would literally just record my grading screen and SpeedGrader and Canvas and me talking and doing annotations from there. I often would use Miro as a tool combined with this. So I'd like put papers and stuff into Miro, and I'd use Miro to annotate live. And then Snagit added an awesome feature in their newer version where you could actually live annotate. You used to not be able to do that, and you can actually add arrows and they would stay for a second and then disappear. It was kind of a cool transition and things. That's sweet. I started using that to do that. And then what's awesome in Snagit is when I'm done, I can trim it real quick in their software. The thing I also really like about Snagit is, as much as I love cloud services today, one of my criticisms of a lot of video platforms that move to cloud services is while it's great that it goes right to a cloud service to simplify things for you, it also means there's a lot more trouble in the processing sometimes. Like you get those recording people that like, we don't recommend going over 5 minutes. It's like, okay, I get smaller videos, but sometimes my feedback needs to be longer than 5 minutes.
I just need 6 minutes, and then it doesn't load or it.
Like, I'm not going to 30 minutes, but sometimes my feedback might hit 7, 8, 10 minutes, depending if I'm talking through the whole thing with them. So like, I needed something that was a little bit more reliable. So what I like about Snagit is it saves it to your computer as a file right away, but then I could hit a share button up in the corner to create a little link for it, and I drop that into the comments in Canvas in this case, but you could do it in any LMS, and then the student can click on it. And the other thing that was fantastic that Snagit has added in their newest version of Snagit is that they have now added annotated commenting on the videos. So when I would send this to students, I could ask them to comment
Game
back,
changer.
and they could comment on the timeline at a specific time. They didn't even need a Snagit account. They just put in their name, they comment on it, and then it comes up on that part. So we could have a conversation on the timeline of the video about their feedback.
I didn't know it had this. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
this is new. It was just the newest
Okay.
version. I think their
Okay.
2023 license upgraded to it. At least that's what I think. I think we were on 2021 for a while, and then we
Yeah.
did a 2-year jump. And just in this year's jump that we did this year, I got the ability to start doing that, is timeline
That's awesome.
commenting and things like that. So, and it even gives the student the ability to use arrows when they're timeline commenting. So like they can even like box out something on the screen to be like, I'm not sure I understand what you're
I
saying.
don't get why
Most
you
of my
did this
students
one. Or...
didn't do that because it was, we weren't
Sure,
using it
sure.
like that quite that well, but I could see potential for that. So I think the reason I wanted to bring this up during the ungrading series is that when you're doing ungrading, you're going to need ways to provide contextual feedback, like in-depth feedback. And sometimes in the LMS, it's hard to type all that out. Sometimes it's easier to be in a situation where like you're sitting down with the student to talk through with them. And I think Snagit is one of those options that gives you the ability to quickly just record feedback and then have a conversation. Like they could technically record stuff back if they have accounts, or they could easily just make some comments back, or then you could end up getting on a call if it gets more complicated, things like that. But it gives you the ability maybe to give some initial, more intense feedback that they can walk themselves through and take a look at. So that's why I love Snagit.
Yep.
Couple of notes about Snagit's pricing. So Snagit is not free at all.
This is not a free tool.
It's not
at
a free
all.
tool. But quite frankly, folks, we try to get free tools for you, but some of this stuff is just to get all those features. You're not going to get it. They have to make money somehow. Okay.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them
Anyway,
do.
but I will say this: they do have an education plan, and it is only a basically $38 purchase for a license for yourself. Actually, I think it's $38 for 1 to 4 licenses, or that's price each. Okay, yeah.
The BAA per.
So if you're buying only 4 licenses, it's 38, and then if you get more, it goes down in price. Okay. So anyway, but for education, if you're buying this for yourself, and that's really all you would need, you don't need your students to have it. You can buy it for yourself for $38, and that's it. It's not a yearly purchase. It's not a subscription. It's just a purchase. You get access to the software on your computer. You can download it onto as many computers as you need, and then you just move forward. You go with it.
What I believe they're trying to do, because no software anymore wants to just let you purchase them one time. But what I think they do actually is they let you buy one time. I really believe that's what I'm reading. And they give you 1 year of free maintenance, like a maintenance plan.
Yes.
And then you can pay a monthly fee after that to keep the maintenance thing up, which gives you updates to the platform.
Yes.
So like you can buy the software right now, not do the subscription, and you have TechSmith's Snagit 2023 until you die.
And I will also say, when they release new versions of it, so they release a version every year. When they release new versions of it, if you already have a license, it's significantly cheaper to upgrade.
Yeah.
That's why we keep getting licenses, because it's like a couple bucks.
They want to keep you in the platform.
Upgrading. Yeah. So they want to keep you in the platform. And the other way they make their money is you don't have unlimited cloud storage. So when you do like sharing links, that goes to a cloud storage area. You don't have unlimited. You'd have to upgrade to do that. But it's very easy to manage that cloud storage and just delete out videos you don't need anymore. Like it's a very reasonable cloud storage for the payment that you do. So very few people have to pay for it. Like I pay for extra cloud storage, but that's because I don't like going in and deleting videos, and I use it for work. So that's just the context. We pay for that.
That's an easy choice. Right.
That's an easy choice. But for many of you, I think it's very doable. So education plan for sure. Check it out. Any other comments? Well, I know you use it at work, so I don't know if you.
I don't use it like you did, and I honestly, your examples there are fantastic. I use it to help people. Like Josh is doing that too. He's helping his students, but I use it to take screenshots. Like, hey, here's where this feature is. Hey, here's how to set this up. Like, it's like tutorial making for me.
Tutorial stuff. Try to do that at work. I mean, that's my primary work usage of it. Yeah.
So I've never used some of those more instructional features, which is I didn't even know existed. That's really awesome. But it's easy. I mean, it's so easy to use. You can leave it up all the time and just have it as your primary screenshot taker, or just pull it up to do that quick video and then move it along. So I love it as well. I probably use it every day or every other day at work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a number one tool for me.
I use it all the time. I always have like with the newer version of Snagit, you can get like a little widget on your computer that kind of like hides itself on the side of the screen when you're not using it. And
hover over it, it pops out or something.
Yeah, if I hover over it, there's like a little capture button and I can click on it and
love that.
do that. And I really like that they used to, for a very long time, for some reason, not have it's called picture in picture, where you can do your screen and yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
2023 has upgraded to now do that, and so you can actually put yourself in the corner for picture in picture on Snagit, which is useful. And you can change the size of yourself and move yourself around and stuff like that. It's very
even better.
It's super useful.
Lots of flexibility.
So, yeah.
All right, folks, that's this episode of the Ungrading series. Next episode is episode 94. We're going to have Dr. Timothy Shea joining us. We're looking forward to that conversation. And we're going to look at how do we assess ungrading, right? Specifically trying to answer, like we're saying, it's not about the numbers, not about, like there's a process. You still have to assess the work. So what does it look like?
After you've gotten all this stuff set up, how do you actually do the assessment? And Tim has a ton of experience with ungrading, so I'm excited to hear about all his situations and context.
Reminder, as always, find us on the social medias, which is just Twitter and YouTube, at High Tech Podcast.
Two. We weren't really.
It is more than one.
We were on YouTube the whole time, but that was only because we wanted to keep the name. We else got it. That was really the only reason. Now we
snagged our title, and then email us for promotion, for money, for free coffee, for interview
if
opportunities.
you just want to give us money, feel free to hit us up on social media. That's
hashtag be a sponsor.
Hashtag be a sponsor. Yeah, to your point, Will, to say that we've had if you've got an idea you want to talk about on the podcast, or you're an app or something that you're interested in coming on to talk about your app on the podcast, we've been getting a lot more of those messages over the last month or so from people.
We love it.
We respond to them. Let us know. We'd love to have you guys on the podcast. So
yes, please. And head to our website, hightechpod.us. It is our website. It has all of our social information, all of our episodes. Every episode has an episode page. We want to make sure you have the resources to not only listen to us and enjoy our banter, which I've heard from a few folks. I appreciate that feedback. But do something with this, right? Like we do this because we love it, but we do this because we want this to help your practice. So head over to the hightechpod.us for that kind of information. Thank you again for joining us for another week of the High Tech Podcast as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology, whether it be physical, digital, hybrid, graded, or ungraded, whatever it is. Until next week, we'll see you.
See ya.